Welcome to the In Pursuit podcast by Pathfinder. My name is Deon Garrett, and this is a podcast for people who, kind of like me, are interested in growing in every part of life to become more whole, full, abundant. So if you're in pursuit of whole life, or at least trying to be like I am, welcome. Today with me, I've got Joe Kennedy. Any relation to the famous Kennedys?
I think I'm not by checkbook, but yeah. So we're from the noble Arkansas Kennedy.
Oh,
lineage, yeah. So
yeah, are they related to the Clintons at all, or no? Not Kennedys by the way of Clintons.
No,
where the Clintons weren't even from Arkansas, really, were they?
Yeah, I know Bill was, but
okay.
yeah, I think Hillary was California.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I'm not going to find an underwriter for the podcast today. Is that what you're telling me?
Maybe not. Yep.
So Joe's on the podcast today as we talk about a pursuit of a whole life. And I've been really excited about this episode since you and I talked, because we're going to talk about and I feel like I probably say this about a lot of things, but this is genuinely one of my greatest passion areas, and that is fatherhood. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about what it is to be dads. And so you've got 3 kids, married, have 3 kids, mm-hmm. 3 girls.
Correct. Yep.
Ranging, what did you say, 7 to 13?
Yep.
I don't know. Did you find out what you were going to have before they came into the world?
Yeah, that was one of those negotiations with Rachel where, like, first kid we definitely wanted to, because you have to have the room pristine, painted. Everything has to be like right.
Yeah.
Number 2, we kind of went the same route. Number 3, I was really hoping she would let us just like ride it out and see, but still, I think she won on that one. So it's like, no, we have to be prepared. We have to be fully ready.
And so by the third one, you're like, probably expecting it's going to be another girl. Were you unsure?
Whenever you have like 2 kids already, you're already especially that young, you're already so sleep deprived anyway. So you're just like, I don't know how much thought or how much passion I put towards it. Like, just please be healthy. And we're good. And at that point I had that foolish thought of, okay, I have 2 kids now. These 2 kids are very different. My oldest is that like analytical, like stern face, like she's super like detail oriented, and my middle is like super kind of prissy, and so I'm like, I've mastered both types of children. There's 2 types of children, so the third is going to be one of these 2, so it's going to be easy. Nope, third's this whole different breed. Whole different breed.
Turns out there's more than 2 kinds.
Yes.
Yeah, that's funny. So for us, I think similarly, I didn't really have a care or concern about what our third was going to be. But we were like, well, let's find out, because we did with the other 2. And we went to the ultrasound, and they're like, you want to know what you're having? Yeah. You're having a boy. We're like, what? Like, we hadn't really thought that much about it, but it just didn't seem. And we went to this little coffee shop by the hospital. Caribou Coffee, is that still around? I wonder if it is.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be more independent. I feel like it got bought out by somebody, but we just sat there and we're like, we're having a boy? At that point, we were just like so into raising girls, and we're like, this is our life. And we're like, we're having a boy? What are we going to do with that? So anyway, so today I want to just talk about, again, I am passionate about fatherhood. Increasingly in our world, or at least in our part of the Western world, there has been some cited, known, lack of fatherhood investment, and we've seen some of the societal ways that plays out, and so for me, it's such an important issue personally. It's a passion of mine. I think it's a important societal issue, and so we're going to tackle it all. We're going to set them all straight today.
Absolutely, Joe. We've got all the facts. So yeah.
All the facts, all the answers. So for me, I was a kid growing up, like from the time of middle school, and I was a little bit different in a lot of ways, but I was different in the sense that I was already excited about being a dad and having a family someday. So this is, I always tell people right now, I'm living my dream. I have a family. It's a healthy, fairly whole family. This is my life dream. And I realized that not many boys growing up were that way, and that's all right with me. What about you? Like, is fatherhood something that's been on your radar for a long time, or was that kind of you had a baby and you're like, oh, this is what it is?
No, it's always been there. I think from like the earliest prayer that I can remember having, it was, God, please let me one day be a husband. And then please let me one day be a dad.
Really?
Those were the two things, like since probably 7 or 8 years old forward. That's all I wanted. So yeah, that was forefront. And like to your point, I'm having a blast with this. It's crazy. It's sticky. It smells weird. You're sleep deprived, but it's a blast every moment. These little kids are hilarious.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to enjoy every single moment that I've got with them. So yeah.
Well, you can either think they're hilarious or find them annoying, and it's probably a little better to see it as hilarious. So, I mean, that's young. What do you think for you when you're thinking about being a dad and being a father? To what do you attribute that? Was this like a high ideal in your family of origin? Was this like why do you think?
Yeah, there's probably
drawn to it?
Like a little bit less graceful of a trigger. Growing up, I lived out in country Arkansas. We had like traditional Catholic family. I've got 3 siblings, and whenever I was about 7 years old, my dad passed away from Agent Orange.
Really?
From his time serving in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
So that really, I think that in itself was a real trigger. But going forward with the conversation a little bit, that left my mom raising 4 relatively young kids, very young kids, out of a trailer in Arkansas with a half-finished house that they were building together. No formal education, no career. She had, a Social Security stipend to keep us upright, and just had this monstrous thing happen. And then she did what many people would do in that circumstance, and she got pissed. But some people get pissed and take it in different directions. She used that anger as fuel, and she cranked through raising us, finished building a house. Went on to get her bachelor's degree, her master's, and her PhD, and ended up doing all of these incredible things. And that catalyst in many cases was just anger from that event playing, and that seeing somebody so growing up, kind of leading to one of the topics of this conversation, I personally witnessed strong women doing everything in the house. If there was something that needed to be done, you could look like either one of my older sisters or my mom was taking care of it. So there really was no line of delineation between who should be doing what. Yeah. There was just a vacuum, and then that vacuum gets filled. So yeah.
And I'm sorry about losing your dad at such a young age. You say you were 7, so right around the time that you started praying that you'd become.
Yep.
Yeah. That's something. But as you're saying, like you're watching needs, and you're watching people fill those needs, and you're not thinking a whole lot about stereotyped roles or anything. It's just all hands on deck.
Absolutely. And it wasn't like it wasn't like a feminist banner or anything in the house or anything like that. It was, there was just a whole lot that needed to be done. And, there was a lot of time spent raising us, getting a house finished, like being built, and then all like her own career pursuits. But then just a lot of other, great things. I mean, she ran with the Olympic torch at one point. She had like U.S. senators' cell phone numbers, House of Reps' cell phone numbers. She had like grants that she would get for schools.
Coming out?
I'm
this is crazy.
Man.
Yeah.
So it's a high bar I've got that I'm chasing right now.
Yeah. What was her PhD in?
It was early childhood psychology.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, accomplished lots of pretty cool things. So
you grow up with, I mean, those are really formative things. Obviously, losing a parent, that's hugely traumatic, but you also grow up witnessing this mother who is a phoenix rising from the ashes and building a great life. But along the way, you carry this desire to be a husband, be a father, and so then what? You go through school.
It's
put out an ad for a.
And that's one of those I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to parenting. I had no real I didn't witness anybody like being a dad.
Yeah.
I'm faking this till I make it every single day. And so far it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, it's like, I've developed this like internal vision of what a dad's supposed to be. And it's kind of like a Obi-Wan Force ghost. That's how I like to describe it. But that's kind of like, kind of what I use as kind of inspiration for a lot of these activities. But yeah, after like went through high school, moved up here for college in St. Louis.
Okay.
And then got to do some cool things. Like I studied abroad in London, studied abroad in Thailand.
Wow.
Then, once I graduated, was lucky enough to get a job right out of college. And then, just made that super intelligent financial decision, like in 2007 to buy a condo. Like, I'm not sure if anybody else has done that, but
yeah, for me, it was in 2004 that I bought a condo. And, yeah. But don't worry, it lost more than half of its value by the time I had to sell it in 2009 when I moved to Missouri.
I ate a decent chunk whenever we sold ours. Yep. But yeah, then, basically I ended up having a very good friend throughout college. This awesome guy named Matt, giant beard, wonderful human being. Like he lives on a sailboat and just goes up and down with his family, like along the Pacific, and just consults with Microsoft. So it's like he's a fascinating guy. But he was a really good friend of mine, and he was a really good friend of Rachel's. This like I was friends with him for about a decade. Never once came across Rachel, and then he invited us both to Lake of the Ozarks one day, and that's where I met her. And from that point, like. I'd had some relationships before, never ones that were like in any way serious. And like when I met her, it was like I didn't want to be away from her at any moment. And definitely very quickly knew I wouldn't spend the rest of my life with her. Yeah. So from that point, it was just basically like, how do I dupe her into this? Because she's way out of my league.
Like if I mentioned I'm a Kennedy?
Yeah, yes. And that was fun too, because the condo that I had was a complete like guy owns this entire operation.
Yeah.
Like I went to go like couch shopping whenever I bought the thing and was like, there's a hammock that's like half the price. This hammock's super cozy. So I had a hammock in my living room. And like after the first date with Rachel, and I come home and I'm excited. I walk in my condo. I'm like,
this is
so I knew it was like, there's 3 weeks of me dating her and like, taking her to nice restaurants and going doing cultural activities and stuff like that. I'm sure I'm building up like this guy lives someplace that's decent. So I'm like, this whole time I have to like fill this place with real people furniture, get couches, like stuff like that. And yeah, we were able to make all that magic happen. And like I had painted this thing like right after I got it, and I don't know what I was really thinking, but like I went to Home Depot, just grabbed some swatches that stuck out to me. And it was like this bright red, this like Rams blue, this gold. I mean, it looked like it was missing a carpeted wall and it would have been a skating rink, like an 80s skating rink. So I'm like, whew, like, God bless Rachel. Like she saw through all of this to stay with me.
You kept her away from it long enough though, till she saw the rest of you. Because that, I mean, first date stuff, if she would have seen that, she would have been out.
Yeah,
run away screaming.
That's when I'm like, I don't know how to cook. So I'm like, she's coming over here to eat. So like I ran over to Applebee's and got like 2 different meals. Came back, put them on plates. I didn't really think through that. Like I should have bought the same meal and put them on both, but they are 2 distinctly different meals.
Yeah.
And she's like, you cooked bourbon chicken and Cajun shrimp on this one. So I had to come clean on that one.
I'm just feeling a little, feeling creative today. Yeah.
It's a little power factor.
So was it, and I know a little bit about Rachel, was part of your attraction to her at that time? I mean, she's also a pretty strong, capable, was there some of that vibe of like, oh, this feels familiar, this feels like, or what? Or was you're just nice eyes or what?
I honestly don't know. Sometimes it's weird ways that God works. It's like, like helping me avoid, certain decisions earlier on, and then just like lining me up with the perfect match, which, is probably more of a question for her. Like, why on earth did you ever go out on a date with this guy? But yeah, that was, she definitely had like a gravity. And she quickly figured out she's one of the funniest people I've ever met. And just, a lot of our kind of, our beliefs, like, and all this stuff kind of lined up pretty well. A lot of things we enjoy, traveling and food and stuff like that, just it all lined up really well. And it's just like, the more I got to know her, the more I'm like, oh man, she's perfect. So, yeah.
So, you all get married, 3 kids later, here you are.
Yeah. That was, that's pretty much how it played.
Yeah.
Like, we lived out in Creve Coeur and then like out in the city, moved out here to the burbs, and then started growing the family.
Yeah. So then as you were growing the family, you guys both have careers at this point.
Yeah.
And you've got to start, kids come into the picture, and that scrambles everything. How did you navigate that? Like, what was, there's a pretty, I don't know, there's some traditional ways that people handle that. Either one of you is going to stay home, or we're going to find great childcare and both pursue our careers, or someone's career sometimes will take a front seat and someone's a back seat. Like, how did you navigate that?
It was really easy before you have kids.
Yeah.
It's like, it's amazing how little of a mess two like adult human beings can make in a place. And then, I remember thinking back too on that time, I'm like, I felt like I was busy. Then I was like, now knowing what I know now with 3 kids, I'm like, bro, you were not in any way busy. But yeah, that we had kind of a little bit more of a traditional line of delineation before kids came along. Rachel's mom really, she did the finances in her house. She did the cleaning. She would kind of share the cooking with her dad, or with Rachel's dad. And then her dad did the fixing stuff around the house, mowed lawn, like took out trash, that kind of stuff. So we kind of, I guess, started off a little bit in that group. But then when kids came along, that's where Rachel has a career with equal weight as mine, and all this other stuff just costs a lot from a time perspective. And that's where, I started kind of, I think in many cases, like when you saw there were challenge and pain, you just kind of step in and try to do it. And I've never really viewed any sort of activity as outside of my capabilities, whether that's, like anything from a house perspective, or, like hot gluing googly eyes to like little pinchy things to make swaps for Girl Scouts.
Is that the technical term, little pinchy things?
Yeah, little pinchy things. So, so there's really, I don't really view anything kind of outside of what, what I'm capable of doing on that front. But yeah, like basically whenever I would see her struggle or see her, kind of get pulled into work, I would try to fill that void.
Yeah.
And whatever that role was. So, including like bathing 3 kids.
Yeah.
Same tub. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and for some people, so again, I had 2 daughters first. I think there are lots of men who don't. It's interesting. I'm doing this. You're in the same thing. You're doing the Thursday morning thing. I think I see you at the front of the room.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're in this study on Thursday mornings, and I can see systemically, generationally, how fatherhood has gone through some transformations here in the United States. They talk about the war years and trauma that kind of falls on a whole generation of men, especially, from World War II. And then after that, I mean, you live through the after effects of Vietnam and the traumatic effects that has. So primarily, yes, there were women involved increasingly as time went on, but primarily just really affecting a cohort of men. And so we come away with these like stereotypes of men who are, a little bit distant, maybe a little emotionally removed. They might be, the family's in the house doing stuff and the dad's out fixing stuff in the garage, away, separated. If he's a good dad, he's not an abuser, not yelling, but not necessarily really immersed in the life of the family. Certainly not overly affectionate, not verbally affectionate, not, heaping on praise or affirmation. But, if you're a good dad, you're going to work, you're not getting drunk, not beating your kids, like
Yeah.
you're paying the bills, you're keeping the household stable, but you're not that involved. And I mean, this is, again, there are lots of exceptions to this, but I think this is kind of, for a long time, the myth or the story of what American fatherhood looked like and what it meant to be a good dad. And so men had all these, this extra time for socializing, and they'd be in leagues and doing this stuff. And I think that stuff's great. I think men and women both benefit from having time with people away from the family, but men especially were given lots of range to be away, and the household stuff and the family stuff, and certainly the emotional nurture stuff was largely left to the women. And I kind of grew up in a household that way. My dad was a carpenter. We had an unfinished basement. My dad would get home after a long day's work and he'd just be down in the basement. And there were some other issues in our family, but like my dad was very like away. And so it was kind of me and my siblings, my sisters and my mom, kind of in the family. But there was something in me during that time. And I don't know if it was just missing my dad or wishing I had a deeper connection with my dad, or I don't know, maybe it's just the nudging of the Spirit of God. Because I think there are lots of men who grew up the way I did who then say, yeah, my dad didn't do it, I don't have to do it either. I don't know how to do it. But for me, for whatever reason, it was like this, I want to figure out how to do that. And to be honest, and I don't talk about this a ton, but when we found out we were having a son, the girls were okay. When I found out I was having a son, I was a little like, I'm not sure I know what to do with this. And when we had our first child and we didn't know if it was a girl or she was a girl or a boy yet, I was nervous that it might be a boy, because I was just like, I don't think I know how to raise a son. And so I feel like God was good to me, that he gave me a couple of daughters first to increase my sense of like, hey, I know how to be a dad. I know I can be a good dad. And then he gave me a son to go like, all right, you gotta figure out a new set of things. So anyway, that's a lot about how I've come to see the place of men and fathers in the current narrative. But I think there are increasingly more men who are making some decisions to be closer and to their families. And yes, there may be work or provision or some of those things, but to be emotionally closer and to be more involved in the like daily life of that, being in the trenches of raising kids. Like I see it all the time around here,
Yeah, you've got some great examples around here. And yeah, like whenever I think my worst times being a parent were when I tried to be somebody I wasn't. And that was whenever I tried, in many cases, to put on that, like the 80s dad, like mentality, the firm, like, be firm, let them tough it out kind of thing. And it's like, there's just, sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it's not. But like, basically, like I figured out relatively quickly, especially after, having the first two, is like, just like, like follow your heart, trust in God, follow your heart, and be you, because they're going to know. So, they're forced to live with you on a daily basis. There's not anything you can hide from these people. But yeah, that's,
But adults do that all the time. They think they can hide stuff from their kids. And
No,
even
not at all.
if kids don't like have, even if they don't like know everything, like they know, they're like, there's some stuff going on here. Yeah. You can't get away with it. When it comes to specifically raising daughters and doing that, like as a dad, and again, 13, 10, 7, what are some of your proud moments? Like what are the either it can be a specific thing or it can just be like a general situation where you're like, this feels good. Like I feel like I'm showing up and I'm doing the work in a way that I'm going to look back on later and be proud about it.
And there's just so much. And I think having 3 girls is honestly easier on me than it is on Rachel. Because the girls, like they're just like, I don't know, super chill with me. And, it's like, but yeah, it's like there's like a dad-daughter relationship that's just something super special. But yeah, it's I can definitely say when I'm not successful, and that's when I've attempted to do hair. And it's one of those where I used to because I used to drop off on many cases, and like I used to get asked to do like pigtails, and it would be like the most crooked part. And I'd drop her off in Mrs. Cannell's room, and she would know immediately. Oh yeah, looks like Dad did your hair.
Dad did your hair today.
Yeah, and it's like Rachel would have the outfit picked out that was awesome, and then if they come in and they're like, can I dress like Elsa today? Yes, 100% you can. You're good. But those are it. But like being raised by like a super strong woman. Like both of my grandfathers passed away like whenever I think by 14. Like, so there's like no like
there's no man.
adult like guy in our world. So like I was surrounded by women. Like I kind of feel like, God kind of built me to be a father of daughters. Everything they do, like there's nothing like super uncomfortable for me. Like none of these topics are off limits. It's got to be way more uncomfortable for them than it is for me. Because I don't really have any sort of like, like boundaries, or there's no topic that I won't, dive into.
Yeah.
And the only time I really feel myself getting pulled back into the more traditional dad role is whenever boys conversation comes up. And it's more of the, didn't I see that kid in shorts and Crocs in 6-degree weather at the bus stop today? Yeah, pass, move on, pick another, go back in the bucket. But yeah.
I know you're joking about that, but like, do you feel that kind of when you say the traditional dad thing, like that protective dad thing, or just that I want more for you? Or
absolutely. It's and like one of those things that helps drive me a little bit is the terror that my daughters might be attracted one day to somebody like me. So I'm like, all right, I have to be the best version of myself so that they end up like, if they're crazy enough to go this route, they end up marrying somebody who's gonna take care of them. So
now you say that in jest again, but I think one of the examples that someone like you is setting for your daughters is, hey, I'm not going to settle for a man who is not like emotionally in touch or emotionally available, like this kind of whole stonewall. I don't talk about my feelings, which I think is a really great thing to teach daughters to be like, hey, because they're going to be mad about it later. In dating life, it seems kind of cool, or rebel without a cause or something. But they're going to be mad about it later. They're going to, they're going to be in a therapist's office yelling at their husband for not being emotionally available, because before they thought it was cool and he was, he was all like mysterious, but they're going to resent him later, and that's going to become a problem. So I take a lot of pride in the fact that I think one of the things that I've done, even though, yes, there's lots of ways that I hope my daughters do not pick a guy like me. One of the things that I'm like, no, but I think I've taught them what it is to be emotionally present, emotionally available, connected. And I don't think there's any chance my daughters are going to settle for a guy who can't be that for them, because they're just like, no, that's.
Yeah. Here's open. And mine are still young, so I have to figure out this, like who are they going to gravitate towards? So I haven't really gotten the first through the gate yet, but yeah. It's that's going to be a fun stage for me, I'm sure. So I think at that point we'll have to have a different podcast, and you can give me some like in-depth details how to survive on this front. But
yeah, and you weren't kidding. I mean, this is reaching back to what we were talking about earlier, but you weren't kidding that, especially as girls hit their teen years, moms, man, just the resistance that happens in the kind of female on female dynamic. And there were lots of times where I had to tell Jocelyn, like, hey, you're a great mom. You were a great mom when they were little. You're still a great mom. They're going to come back to you, but I see it right now that they are not. And some of that's the natural process of differentiating. And I think this is why it's really helpful if you've got two parents around, because if you're a girl in the house and you're trying to find your own way into life, you're trying to find your sense of selfhood, the first thing you do is you push back on the predominant relationship with the person of the same sex, same gender, who like, you're like, I have to differentiate from you first. And so then, meanwhile, I still need a parent because I'm not ready to go out into the world. So I'm going to go, cling closer to dad. And it is brutal to watch.
Well, and it's really tough for us to navigate because you have to play between these two in as safe a way as possible. It's dangerous. It's really tempting just to do that. Back away. I've got to go play golf or something. But like, that successful navigation of those dynamics is what kind of might make us good at what we do.
Do you ever feel afraid when you see like some of those tensions rising, like of what their future relationship is going to be? Yeah. Not just for your own well-being, but like, oh no.
Yep. And then, so I tend to react by sacrificing the body. So I will just like Dick Van Dyke it over a chair or something and just do something just like to completely change the whole dynamic of the room. Yeah. But yeah, like that's, it's tough to navigate those.
I could have used this conversation about, I don't know, 10 years ago.
But you can sense that friction. It's even before a conversation starts. So you can walk in a room like, yep. So, but yeah, it's fun. But yeah,
it's fun.
It really is. And they are absolutely hilarious. So yeah, right now we're doing, so Cotillion popped up. If you're familiar with Cotillion, it's basically like a program to teach, like young girls to be ladies, like how to dance formal dances and what forks to use and that kind of thing. All stuff super important now. But that's one of those where like we keep joking with Isabel. It's like if you get enough cotillion points, we're going to send you to cotillion. So every time she does something like not super ladylike, she gets a cotillion point. But it's in total jest. And like they started doing it with all the other siblings in the house, and it's hilarious. And
I mean, it is the age of Bridgerton, though. So I mean, that stuff looks fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
So
to the just kind of back to the like being in the trenches and trying to be I don't know, you said sacrificing yourself, but trying to be some sort of emotional balancer for between your wife and your daughters. That's like a unique role you can play. And I think as a dad, I haven't always done that well. There are a lot of times where I would get anxious because again, like I don't want to get into my family of origin too much, but there's still some kind of relationship tensions there. And it's like as much as possible, I think actually both in mine and Jocelyn's family. So as much as possible, like I am trying to do whatever I need to do to lay the groundwork for healthy relationships with our kids through adulthood, relationships with our kids, with each other as siblings, but especially with us, or also with us as parents. Yeah. So I'll get a little anxious at times when there's tension coming up, and I think your idea of humor, of trying to change the mood or the dynamic, I would tend to take a more confrontational approach to it, or I would get afraid that like, oh no, you guys are going to wreck your relationship. And Jocelyn would say stuff like that to me, like, hey, it seems like you don't think I can handle this situation. And of course I denied it. I'm like, no, that's not it. That's not it. It's just, and I think it took me a while to get in touch with the fact that, oh no, I really am afraid. Like I want my daughters to have a relationship with their mom. And I would see moments where I thought, oh, they're not handling this well and they need me. And I would just make it worse. And so what I eventually had to learn to do, again, the Dick Van Dyke stuff would be better, just like trip over something. But what I eventually just had to do is just like walk out of the room sometimes when things were starting to heat up, because I would just make it worse. And my anxiety I'd bring into the situation and just give them the benefit of the doubt that they'd be able to move through it. And of course they did. Like Jocelyn is not a relational idiot. Yeah. Like she's pretty sharp, but I think for me, some of those anxieties would take over so much that, like I just wouldn't handle it. I wouldn't handle it well. So I think that's one of the things, one of the opportunities that dads have if they're in an environment like we are, where there's a mom present. It is. I wish that's something I could have done differently. Is be a whether it's through levity or something, change the dynamic when things are starting to get tense, and not like we need to have a hard conversation. That tension's fine. Yeah. It's just the friction tension. I wish I could have been the guy to bring more levity, or I wish I could have at least, because I'm not as funny as you, I wish I would have at least learned earlier to just walk out of the room and trust them to deal with the relationship, because I made a lot of
That's a great point.
Stuff messier.
I don't really, yeah, it's really hard for me to do that. I've got to, if there's a problem, I have to fix it,
Yeah.
and I got to keep poking at it until it's fixed. So yeah, I think like where we eventually get is that, nothing unites like a common enemy.
Yeah.
So occasionally I'll be that enemy, where like they're both like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, that too.
This guy broke the Wi-Fi on purpose. But yeah, like it's, and the challenge on that front too is like, it's never the same solution to the puzzle. Like every puzzle is unique in its own, and you have to figure that out kind of on the fly when you're, exhausted from a day's work and you've had all these other things that you've got on your mind.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of our job. Yeah.
But speaking of that, actually, that takes me in a bit of a different direction. But we're all kind of working out our own puzzle as a family, and so for a while, family stereotypes of just how things needed to work were pretty fixed. There's a therapist that I think she's so wise. Her name's Esther Perel, and she talks about how for a lot of years, everything was pretty much defined for you. Like the community you were going to live in, you were going to live and die in that community. The work that you were going to do, that was decided for you. Even your primary relationships, who you're going to marry, that was decided for you. And so you lived life with all of this definition, not a lot of freedom, but a lot of definition. And now we're living in a world where all of those things have gone away. We have incredible amounts of freedom to decide everything, where I'm going to live, who I'm going to marry, how many, then if we have kids, well, first of all, whether or not we're going to have kids. I mean, some people that decision's taken out of their hands, but for now it's a decision that we can choose to make. And then if we have kids, we get to decide how will we live now that we have kids? Like what's going to be the dynamic? And so there's incredible amounts of freedom, but she says the downside of it is that everything is a freaking negotiation. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I hear that, like, oh my gosh, that's right. That in all the freedom, if you can decide a million things, now you got to make a million decisions. And that's really tiring. And you can do a lot of second guessing about, did I make the right decision? So, I for a while, things were really defined in society. And for some people that worked great, for some people that did not work well at all. But you just kind of were like, hey, but this is what it is. Now we have all of this flexibility. And so as you were talking about putting together the puzzle pieces and everything's kind of unique, I think I want to go there of just like when you're in maybe we're speaking to a younger couple right now and they're trying to figure this stuff out. Like, what do you say? Or even what are some of the, as you guys were trying to figure this out, what is some of the good advice or counsel or support you had? And what was some of the bad stuff that was not helpful for you?
I think one of the best that I had was our pastor who married us, his name's Joe Rogers. During our marriage, like counseling, like leading up to the wedding, he introduced us to this concept of too many people under the hoopah. And he was like, there should be 3 people under there. There's God, there's you, and your spouse. Nobody else matters. And that's one thing that we've really held true to since is everything that's been, awesome that we've experienced. There's God and there's us two together to celebrate it. And, there's obviously like some more follow, but every challenge that we faced, we've done it together. Every conversation, every one of those decisions, ultimately it has to be us. And that's what, I would recommend as well is, make those decisions together. And then don't be afraid to calibrate either. And this is one of the, so for my job, I manage a team of analysts. And they probably are sick and tired of hearing me talk about how awesome it is to work on a team of people who are super passionate about what they do. So if you've ever worked on like a team where you've got the right players and they're all love what they do, it's something super special. You get so much done, but your day flies by, you enjoy it, you love what you do. That needs to be what your marriage is like too. And that often takes calibration. If one of you is really not enjoying an aspect, see if the other person can pick it up and take it and just swap it out. Maybe that recipe is a little bit different day 1 versus day 7. But don't be afraid to kind of shake things up and change that order of who owns what activity. But constantly calibrate until you've reached that harmony that you want.
Yeah, it seems that, and maybe that's easier for you to be able to assess what isn't working. Because I think a lot of times in my marriage and family, doesn't feel good or something's not clicking, but it takes a little while to figure out like exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And so do you feel like you're a person who's just a little more, you said you managed a team of analysts. Maybe you're good at analyzing. Like you're a little more dialed
the data. In. Oh yeah. But no, it's like, your spouse better. I mean, often cases like, your spouse, better than anybody, especially when you've been married as long as I have. So you can tell what they're struggling with, what they're not enjoying doing. And then it's, you can go multiple routes. And I think every relationship's different. For me, oftentimes I like won't have that direct conversation, but I'll kind of like take care of that thing for her. And then when she comes home to do it and it's done, that's that nice thing that's occurred, and that's that slight weight off of her shoulders. It's just kind of that back and forth that plays, because she does that often for me too. I'm kind of a wiggler. I don't like sitting still for long periods of time.
But you're stuck in this chair for a little bit.
But she can totally do it. Yeah. So like stuff like board games, I'm not great at those. I'll still do them. Sitting and reading with the kids, not great. Now I'll like throw them over my shoulder and run down the street with them, no problem. But like she can see when those times are needed from the kids and pick that up from me, and let me kind of keep moving around the house. So there's kind of a give and take that plays. And the thing when it comes to the trade-offs that play, getting very specific, each one of you should have like either laundry or dishes. Because one of you, because those are the two activities that are never done. Mm-hmm. So, that's so each one of you has that to kind of wrestle with.
So you're saying like that's kind of the permanent that's your assignment.
You can swap them off if you want, but it's just
like someone's got to own it
because they're never done. Mm-hmm. Those two activities. So,
I'll tell you what, we were getting near to the empty nest, and then our daughter moved back after college. She's getting ready for grad school, and it's amazing. Just I was like, the kitchen was getting cleaner, and now it's not. Now it's not. It's the opposite direction. But just how life goes, I guess. But I actually do because I'm living my dream, and I'm grateful to have my daughter back for a little while before she goes off to her next thing. I get kind of like my annoyed. Why can't people clean it? And I go, no, this is a gift, because I was starting to feel that wane where I didn't have as much of that to do, and having a little bit more back, and just being able to be immersed in the family and to support my family. And I still lecture my kids about taking care of themselves, because I think it's an important thing to do. Yeah. But I'm finding it's interesting at this phase, because I think I know I'm near the end of that part of it. I'm finding more joy in even those menial, annoying things. Like I realize that I don't want to be in a world where everyone is self-sufficient and we don't need each other. That I've actually found, even though I've been annoyed about a lack of self-sufficiency in my family, that it's actually provided an incredible amount of meaning and richness to my life. Mm-hmm.
And so you and Jocelyn uprooted from Michigan to St. Louis. Yeah. Do you have so you don't have, either of you have grandparents here?
No.
It's
no family here.
And that's one of the things that exists for Rachel and I too. Her parents, right after we had Isabel, they packed all of their possessions into a RAV4 and drove to western side of Mexico. And that's where they live. My family's obviously in Arkansas. Yeah. So, we've raised kids here on our own, which I still haven't figured out why anybody gave us kids to start with, but but we made it work so far. But all of those cases where we didn't really have anybody to dump kids off with, or have those impromptu babysitters or anything like that. And you were in that same situation. It's and there's, it was hard at times, but then it's something to be really proud of, because everything that you have, you and Jocelyn built, Rachel built this.
Yeah, for us, having a church community was a big part of it. What family we did, extended family we did feel like we had, came from our church family and those connections. But yeah, it was very different. And Jocelyn especially felt that, because in our family, Jocelyn always, for the most part, worked part-time stuff along the way, just because of my weird job with nights and weekends. She surrendered having a full-time career for the sake of just providing stability for our family in that way. So she would especially feel the brunt of watching friends around here who had grandparents and siblings and, they'd go out of town for the weekend and, oh, yeah, sure. My mom and dad are coming. They're going to stay at the house and watch the kids. And if we wanted to go away for a weekend, it was like passing them off to this friend on this day and this friend and paying this person. And it was this really difficult planning, very expensive to try to figure out how to make the kids work. And so Jocelyn really, really felt that. And she's such a great sport that she, and trusted that this is where God wanted us to be. And so we figured it out. Now on the back end of being in those years, because thankfully we can leave our kids home now. Yeah. They're old enough. We both see the value of having to lean on other people who are not family to be support. And that's given us depth in relationship, and our kids really value those relationships too.
So do you think like we're going to overcompensate? So like our grandparents, my kids' grandparents, they remain relatively distant, and they kind of surface up like on occasion. Like I wonder if I'm going to overcorrect and just like always be in their bubbles, like.
Yeah,
'cause I could totally see that. Like it's gonna be a challenge for me not to. So
yeah, well, and I wonder if I've done that as a dad.
Yeah,
in some ways, I'm like, I think I've done the right thing, being really emotionally invested and really connected, and then I'm like, and I think that feels right, and I'm not just, but then sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, have I made my kids too much of my life? Have I made them feel too loved, too special? I doubt it, but in the ways that I shut up for them. But certainly as a grandparent, Jocelyn and I talk about our future, and who knows, like where our kids will end up. But like our thoughts about our future are like, we just want to be near where our kids are and where our grandkids are, and we want to be a support. We want to show up. We want to support them,
and being in their lives too. It's like it's a very unique time. Every time's a unique time, but like right now there's. Like you've never had the ability to be more immersed in your kid's world than now. And oftentimes you kind of have to be, or like you have the perception that you have to be, especially when it comes to technology. So like, I think my mom might've been able to name like 3 of my friends, like growing up in school, basically, lived out in the country. So, kept that world different, but like I have access to every single communication that all my kids do. I've got applications and programs that surface up content that, might not be, ideal. Yeah. And it's like, I've got 3 different methods of tracking each one of the kids through Find My and all this other stuff. It's like, it's a complete different world. And it's that wrestling that we have internally about how far do I go to keep these kids safe versus let them grow into the wonderful little people that they need to be. Yeah. And that's something I probably fail at more often than not. And that's one where, like Rachel grew up in a home where like they were very protective. She was really not allowed to do like a ton of things. There was a lot of kind of oversight, especially even going through high school. I grew up in like a completely feral community. Like I was 100% on my own. We've kind of managed to like create, like kind of our pattern by a hybrid of those 2 things.
Yeah, I'm sure that's I'm sure you've arrived at a healthy place because all the, newest research about how to raise kids is kids need to have a sense of agency and autonomy. They need unsupervised moments where they've got to figure out life. And that shouldn't be hitchhiking from, California to New York or something at the age of 15. But they do need those moments in order to build a sense of competency, of agency, of just like, hey, I can do hard things. And that is hard as an in-touch parent to really let your kids experience life and have to figure some things out. Like one of the things that it's been a mantra of mine for a long time is every time I catch myself praying a prayer of protection, I pray a prayer of formation over my kids, because I find myself just, oh Lord, protect them from in the world has got all kinds of stuff. And I think especially, and this is probably, bad things can happen to boys, but I think having girls first, I was more aware of some of the bad things that maybe could happen to girls, or I was more worried about how that would bring greater harm. Maybe because as a male, I'd be like, well, if I went through that, I know how I'd respond. But as a male thinking about what would happen to my daughters if situation X, Y, or Z happened, like I would just pray a lot of prayers of protection. And then I started to realize like, oh my gosh, if God protected them every time I asked him to, the kids would be they'd be weak. They'd be characterless. They would be like, they would just be worthless, really. Yeah. They would not be formed, whole, interesting people of character. And so then it was like, well, gosh, I don't want to throw them to the wolves. I'm not trying to, what did you say, feral?
Feral.
Yeah,
yep,
that's a feral community.
Yeah.
So I don't want them just to run wild, but so I would start praying like, all right, Lord, protect them. But if you see fit, form them and use all things to form them into the people that you want them to be. And it gave me some sense of balance, I think, in my own mind. God didn't need the guidance, but I did.
That's a great call. I think I'm going to have to borrow that prayer for sure. But yeah, and then, as we got to prescription of, theology, like, especially for your kids, like their dad being like your role and like there was never really a question as to like how their faith grew. Like basically they just got exposed to the church through your work and learned and grew. And there wasn't a whole lot of like spiritual thrashing that typically plays with like, kids, especially as they get into the teen years. Was that the case with your crew?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course it's weird growing up as a pastor's kid. I imagine from my perspective, it's definitely weird. Mm-hmm. They're at work someplace out in public and people are like, hey, and they're like, Dad, someone said hi to me today because they recognize me from church. I have no idea who it was. Mm-hmm. So in some ways it feels like kind of like a small town feel. Mm-hmm. But the unfortunate thing is like, you don't know the people who know you. Yeah. And that doesn't feel, that feels more like a surveillance state than a small town where everybody knows each other. You feel like you're being watched all the time. And so I know that was like a weight on my kids. And so I had to be careful especially as they get to the teen years and they start to have a little bit more autonomy and control over their schedule. I had to be careful to express, especially on faith things, like why it was important to me that they continue to develop their spiritual lives and in some ways that they could do that without being overly dogmatic about you've got to, we're going to church as a family and you got to sit with me and you got to, because so much of that became for them in their minds, not, this is something Dad cares about because it's a valuable thing that our family does, but this is something Dad cares about because it's his job and it's his image and this is what the community thinks. Like, I know for them it was hard to sort those things out, and they know, all my kids definitely know because I'm a big mushy emotional thing when it comes to talking about God, especially and the grace of God. Like they know that for me, the reason I do what I do is because it's a sincere, deep, out of a sincere, deep relationship with the living God and wanting other people to have the benefit of that relationship. So they know that's my driver. But I think in the context of being in a church, it's been a little tough for them and tough for me to know how to steer them because I, more than wanting them to be faithful church attenders, I want them to have a relationship with God. I want them to know the love of God and the guidance and the care of God like I've known it. And that can get confusing when it's Dad's work.
Yeah, and I think it relates to kind of what we were talking about a little bit, where kind of you're the man that you are because of a lot of the challenges that you've grown through, like some of the struggles that you've worked through. Same with me on my side, and that's prepared me for my role here. And it's that that balance of what do I let them grow through, but same from a spiritual perspective. I have the faith that I have because I built it. Because I've built that relationship with God. And it was, it's kind of like my thing. And that's where, I try to build a foundation for them to work off of, but then give them the grace and like openness to explore what they want to. And so far it's been pretty fruitful. I mean,
that's great. Well, one of the scary things is to really own your faith. At some point you have to push back on it. That most people who don't have an examined faith, if they've never examined their faith, they probably don't have a very active or living faith. And so there has to come a period of examination in life, and that can look different for everybody, but where you really start to doubt or question, wait a minute. And a lot of parents fear that because they go, oh no, they're losing their faith. And what I say is, well, that could be, but they might actually be finding their faith. Like this is the process that you need to go through in order to find a living faith that's actually yours. I think parents absolutely are responsible for handing down the faith to their kids, but that version that the parents hand down cannot be what carries kids through the rest of their lives. It's inadequate, and unfortunately, I think for a lot of people, that's the faith that they have. It's the faith that was handed down, and they're not trying to carry it through the rest of their lives, and it's not serving them well, and it's probably not very living, it's not very vibrant. So the very thing that sometimes feels like, oh no, my kid is losing their faith, may be the process. It could be that. So be prayerful as your kids go through those moments, but it actually may be the process of your kids actually finding their faith, and the version of faith that's going to serve them through their adulthood. And so that's the kind of mind, vice of parenting.
And I've got three phases right now. So you've got Evie, she's 7.
Yeah.
So everything from a theology or from a religious perspective is really straightforward for her.
Yes.
And she's doing awesome with it. And Isabel, she's 13, and she's starting to understand, or starting to she's growing her faith for sure, and starting to kind of make it her own. So yeah, I kind of have this complete spectrum, and I try to be perfectly honest with them too. I mean, I think I envy that those who have like a blind faith that plays, because even in my mid 40s right now, doubt creeps in my mind on a regular basis, and it always does it when I'm like running. In the middle of a run where I can't get away from anything, I have to sit there for the next 20, 30 minutes, and I have to just work through this. And that's
you don't really see that. Do you really see that as a bad thing? Do you wish you didn't have those questions?
It would be so much easier.
It would be easier, but would it be better?
And I think one of these times I'm going to find that scientific, perfecting formula that removes all doubt ever from surfacing, and it'll happen on the hilly Beacon Point Lane, small sidewalk potholes that play for us.
This is why I don't run. You can spare yourself all the struggle. Just don't run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all the potholes over here and the uneven sidewalks. That's why I run right in the middle of the lane. Cars will go around me. We're fine. But
yeah, the faith development thing is, it's tricky, especially if it's something that you personally care about. And I think it's another thing that my kids have seen in my life is, and I always say anything on parenting, I'm like, yeah, you can take notes on this stuff and then watch this over the next 40 years, see how it plays out, and then you can decide whether or not it was a good idea, because who knows. But I think doubt, like people who, it's like couples who say we never fight, never had a fight. I'm like, do you have a real relationship? Because I just don't know how you can, like, there's something that doesn't feel honest, it doesn't feel real if you have a relationship that never encounters any tension. Now, I don't think you have to. My wife and I, we're good at fighting. we're very seasoned at it. But I don't think it has to be ugly fights. But people are just like, no, we've never fought. I'm like, I don't think you're in a relationship then, because I think two different people with different backgrounds, like, that's going to create some tension, and then occasionally that tension is going to become conflict, and that's okay. And so I feel the same about faith. If you're in a place with faith where you never have any doubts or questions, I'm like, are you in a relationship? Are you really doing the thing? Because there is enough about life that should, and you see it through everybody in the scriptures. There are moments where their faith is shaken, and they work through it, and they come through it stronger.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And like Rachel and I are built slightly different, where she has like a regular release valve when it comes to like that, like when fights trigger. I more of have that tank that just fills up. And then when it fills up, it's that next extremely stupid thing that causes me to like blow my top. And, for me, like, and I know when I'm doing it, and like kind of one of the crazy things too is like, it's easier for me to apologize to my kids than it is for me to apologize to Rachel. I still do it to both of them, but like inside there's a little bit more of this like, resistance. And I don't know, like I still push through it. But I do feel like it's very important for me to apologize to Rachel if I definitely did something like picked a fight over something really, really dumb, which does happen regularly. But like let them, if they were part of that journey in any way, for them to see that side of me too, who's generally sorry. So yeah.
So do you have the experience, do your kids realize like, oh, our dad is a little more connected or a little more available than some dads? Have they said anything like to you ever about like, oh, my other friends' dads aren't, you don't have to name any names, but like, oh, Dad, you're you're different. You're more here for us. You're more available. Do you ever hear that from them?
I think that they enjoy it during the young phases. And then as the 13-year-old's like, I think formally requesting that I take the more traditional dad route. Give me a wider berth. So, but yeah, I mean, like right now, especially with the third kid, because should be our last. I've gotten Rachel to reluctantly agree if I win the Powerball, then we might have a fourth. But I have to win the Powerball first. That's the only way. But Evie's probably my last child. So I'm trying to soak up like every second that I have with her being like small. So that's one of those where if she wants to like paint my nails, whatever, go for it. Whatever. If you want to do my hair, go for it. Like I'm just going to try to sit here and enjoy every single moment I get. And that's, what I'm trying to do with all three. So,
yeah. That's good advice because my youngest is 16 driving now. And I look at, my phone brings up these pictures of him and I'm just like, what? Like he's bigger than me, stronger than me. And I'm like, when is this sweet little kid? And he's still a sweet kid, like love him to death. But it moves quick. Whoever said the days are long, but the years are short.
It's so true. And I remember thinking that like during some of the toughest times of little bitty parenting, like the sleep regression stages and stuff like that. And it was like, this will never end. I'm like, blink and I'm already like mostly through this journey. Yeah. So yeah.
And we don't have to go here if you don't want to, but I would love, if you're willing, to talk a little bit more about what it was like to lose your dad at 7. So 7?
Yep.
And that's how old your daughter is, your youngest. Yeah. I mean, do those things alone do anything to you? Do you make those connections in your brain? Like, as you're letting your daughter paint your nails and you're like little Joe had to lose his dad at this age. Like, how does that affect you? How did that affect you?
Yeah. I think, it was kind of a surreal moment whenever like he passed away when he was 38. And at some point not too long ago, like I surpassed that age. And it was like one of those, like, that could never happen. Like, he's always, like, older. Yeah. But no, like, I think that pops into my head and manifests most is whenever I shift into, like, planning and preparation mode with Rachel, where, like, I have that fear that, what if something happens to me? Is she going to be okay? And then she reminds me immediately that she's an incredibly strong person and she's going to be just fine. Like, obviously, like, he's always reminded with like, don't do anything stupid. And I'm usually doing something stupid, like when it comes to that. But yeah, it's like I'm like, well, I need you to know how to mow the lawn so that if something happens, you'll be able to mow the lawn. She's like, dude, if something happens, I'm just going to pay somebody to mow the lawn. It'll be okay. So it's kind of that. And then I have to remind myself, hey, that's not the same scenario. You'll be all right. But
so it plays in your mind in
is that
way.
Like what happens if
but do you think that makes you more likely? I would imagine it would, to, as you're saying with your youngest, like to really soak up those moments, both from like lost time or whatever that you had with your dad, but also being like, this is not promised.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of this cool experience that I had, like, I don't know, probably 6-7 years ago, when my grandma passed away, and they started kind of moving stuff out of her house. Well, we found this massive collection of letters that my dad wrote, like while he was like from being young, like whenever he was shipped away for like prep school as a kid, all the way through his like Vietnam days. So I probably had like 200 or 300 letters from him. From 5 years old to 22, 23. So it was kind of like this chance for me to sit down and kind of read through and kind of get to know my dad a little bit in a way that I never would have been able to without those. So that was kind of one where it was like really cool opportunity, and really to kind of humanize like someone who's been more kind of just more of a spiritual type situation.
People talk about tragedies or hard things that you go through. Like, you don't want them to define you, but you can't help but have them define you in some way. I think you get to choose the definition. Is this going to be something that is a negative, haunting influence on my life? Or can I let this define me and say, you know what? I want to be a husband and a father. And when I am, I'm going to immerse myself in this work. Like, to me, that's a great way to let tragedy define you, to say, hey, I'm not gonna take this for granted, and I'm gonna live as best as I'm able in a way that, seizes the opportunity.
And what that really, like, one of the things that triggered me doing was, like, wanted to capture, like, create similar artifacts. So I started, like, creating these journals where every time the kids would do something like goofy or silly or amazing, I would just write it down at night. And I'm not a good journaler. Like, my penmanship's absolutely terrible. But I'd take that time late in the evening just to scribble down some thoughts on kind of what they did. And I've got like 5 or 6 like little like books of crude scribbles. And those are probably the most important thing in my house outside of like living people to me. But that's hopefully one day I'll be able to kind of pass those down and just remind them, because like all these amazing events happen to us, 500,000, whatever, of these interactions you have with your kids every day that just make you smile. And blink, they're gone the next day, and you have this whole nother series of events. It's like I'm wanting to hold on to as many of those as I possibly can. So I've got these kind of like trying to capture these reminders in a way that I can eventually funnel down.
That's incredible.
So
yeah.
That, and like I've got like 2.5 terabytes worth of videos and photos of these kids. Like, back in our day, it was like like disposable camera, like, you had 30 shots. Now it's like I take 30 shots of every single one pose that these kids are in, and it lives out there.
There's like a hospital picture of me when I was born, and then there's nothing, I think, until my first or second birthday, because there was a little box that my parents had, and during some move in life, they had it in a storage unit which flooded, and at least that's their story. I just think I was the second born, so I just think they were, they took all the pictures on the first kid and didn't really care. So they were like, oh no, we had baby stuff for you. It just got wrecked when it was flooded in storage. I'm like,
we got all your school pictures. Those are the ones, the stock school pictures. Yeah, we got our first baby book is meticulously done. Second baby book's in a pile of stuff that's still to be assembled. Third baby book doesn't. There's no trace of that one. So yeah.
Well, so one of the things that I did for our girls is I don't remember. It's maybe when they were like 12, 13, 14. I don't know. Unbeknownst to them, I just got like a little book, like these artsy, little like graphic design books, and there's some inspirational sayings in them. And I used it as kind of like a journal of moments where they did something, they experienced a pain, a victory, a success, or something that was happening in our family life. And I would just write like a 2 or 3 sentence entry in this book. And then when they went off to college, like I sent that with them. And for whatever reason, I have not done. I hope Corbin's not going to watch this. I haven't done this for Corbin. I do this for our girls, but I think especially for the girls, I have always taken part of my responsibility as a dad to show them how lovable they are, to show them how they should expect to be treated. And I feel like that's a unique thing that I can do as a dad to my daughters, to be like, hey, this is how. And one thing I say to them all the time is like, I want you to know how lovable you are. I want you to know that you're always loved, and I don't want you to ever have to feel like you have to settle for less than that. Like your birthright is to be loved. And so I think I've tried to show them that more than my son. But and I really don't know. I know with my oldest, she's a card keeper and a reader, and so I think when she went to college, she devoured it. And my next daughter has just been in college for 6 months or something. But there have been some moments where she'll text me randomly, "Oh, Dad, I just read one of the pages in the thing, and like, thank you so much. That was so sweet of you." And but there's something powerful about. I don't know. I don't know if I did it right. Like I was trying to find the right use of the book. I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing this the right way, but I knew I had a vision in mind to like capture some of my heart, my thoughts from the past, to let them know that years past I was thinking about them in ways maybe I was expressing to them, but maybe ways they would see differently as I got older. And
so when your first daughter went to college, how far away did she go?
She went to California.
Oh, dang, man.
That's so very far. So, and people would say, people were awful. So people would be like, oh my gosh, you're letting her go. First of all, you're letting her go. And I'm like
that's really not really my
Well, I'm like,
decision.
yeah, she's like, this is, and she's taking on some of the financial responsibility, and like, why, like, so there was that. And then they would say, oh, I would be so sad if my kids ever went that far away. And I was like, well, I mean, I am sad I'm going to miss her, but there was also like a little bit of judgment.
Yeah.
Like, she must be trying to escape you. And, like Jocelyn would hear that too and just be like, I'm like, listen, you can see about this two ways. Either we've done such a bad job that she's running to the coast, or you can see this as, no, we've raised a child who feels confident moving in the world. She feels love. She knows who she is. She feels relatively safe or secure. And so she's going to go and have an adventure in life. And that's also an amazing thing. And so, but that was hard. That was hard. So our next one is, 2.5 hours away, which feels better because I can just run up and see her.
So that one, like, was there just a period where you had to get used to this? Like, my first kid is in California. It doesn't really matter if she's like anything more than outside of my neighborhood, it's a challenge. But like, just that, were you able to kind of figure out that harmony of how do I text her every 5 minutes? Do I Buddy the Elfer? Like, how does this work? Like,
hi, I'm gonna call you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There was some of that. There's some of that. This sounds really dramatic, but when she went away to college and we'd walk by her room that was empty, the only experience I had to compare it to was death. Oh, yeah. Like it felt like someone was here, but they're not here anymore. And this is their space. And so I honestly had to keep reminding myself, because I would feel then this overwhelming sense of grief. And I'd be like, no. Like she's still here. She's just in California. And like you can text her, you can talk to her. But there was like some dissonance in my mind and I think it's probably especially true for your first kid because you've not done it before. Like your whole life is, like checking in and making sure everyone's okay. And then there just comes a day where they're not in the house anymore and you're not supposed to check in and stalk them. You're supposed to just kind of let them go. And it's really, really unnatural. And so I think my brain just didn't really have a category for that yet. And now it does. But it didn't initially. And so I kind of had to work through some dissonance about what that was. But she was pretty good about giving us calls or texts. But I would, because when my kids were teenagers, we didn't want to have them under surveillance too much. So we'd text them if they were out and we'd be like, hey, give me your status update. And we kind of agreed, like, we're not going to be tracking you on Find My iPhone or Life 360. We didn't have Life 360, but we're not going to track you. But if you don't respond to us, then we will.
Yes,
and so like, we're going to kind of keep a boundary there. We're not trying to follow every step and watch you because we don't think that's good for you and that's not good for us. But if you don't respond, then we will start stalking you a little bit. But when Eliana went away to college, like I would find myself like in the middle of the night waking up, because of course it's California time and she's a college student. So I'd find myself like waking up in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning when I'd get up and I would check her location and be like, she's on campus, she's in her dorm.
The dot's still there. Okay.
Yep. And it would just be this little bit of like, okay, which was...
And I'm asking these questions. I'm 5 years away from that situation. Yeah. It's going to be a mess. I'm going to be a hot mess during that period. So this is going to be a challenge for Rachel. So, yeah.
And that's really beautiful. It's, I think and it was a mess. And it still is with my next one. Again, I think the father-daughter relationship's unique. And so during the high school years, became very close. Like I was always close, but became very close with both my daughters. And so now with Aria, who's 2.5 hours away, there's some of that. It feels like my brain knows what to do with it. And especially now that Eliana's back right now, there's this thing of like, oh, okay, they're not gone forever. They're evolving. They're going to move back and forth. And there'll be times when they're here, and there'll be times when they don't. So it's like my brain understands that better. But I still right after Christmas break, she had a month off and was here. And this is the stuff where I'm like, oh, maybe I care too much. But she went back to school. Jocelyn and I were both at work. She loaded up her car and drove back to school. And then we get home at the end of the day and she had left like a bag of like personal stuff. Like, I think it was like hair and makeup stuff. She's a musical theater major. And so, she's in auditions and performances all the time. So to live without her hair and makeup stuff, like this isn't going to work. And then she left some school stuff behind. And somehow it was just like the last two things that she forgot to grab. And And so she left on a Sunday, like we see it Sunday night, and I'm off on Mondays. And I'm like, she's only 2.5 hours away. I'm just going to drive this up to her. Yeah. So I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And she had to work something at school. And I'm like, well, if I drive up this time, can I take you to lunch? And so I bring her stuff, and she's so grateful. And
That's awesome.
And I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm going to do a bunch of housework or chores or something. So this will be more fun. I'll listen to some podcasts, and I get to take her to lunch, and we go to lunch, and then I leave her. And those moments are moments I never got to have with my oldest because it was California.
A little bit further.
So it's different, but it's sweet. And I love it. And I love those moments. I'm glad that even though she's out of the house, that we get to have those kinds of moments too, because it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a journey. I think what I try to coach them on, they're so young right now, but I'm trying to start as early as possible. And like whenever they're looking to that stage where they're starting to date, it's do you try to you need to find, or I would I don't know how a dad says it, but like find somebody who brings out the best version of you, and that's who you want to be around. That's who you'll always want to be around. And Rachel, she brings out the best version of me. And I try to bring out the best version of her always. And that try has never stopped throughout our whole relationship. And it's like, once the kids are gone, that whole aspect won't be easy, but I loved hanging out with Rachel before we had kids. So I think I'm going to love hanging out with her afterwards. If we get that opportunity. And, she's probably gonna be highly annoyed with me at that point, because I'm gonna go through like a bunch of weird, like long hair phases and like growing a super beard or something like that. Yeah.
Or my kids are like, why do you have a mustache right now? Like, what are you doing?
I grew. Yeah.
I don't know. Just leave me alone.
I do the thing too where like whenever I shave the beard, I'll shave it off in stages and then walk downstairs and see how long I can have a conversation with Rachel with a handlebar mustache until she's like, nope, go back upstairs. But like that whole, like whenever she makes that eye contact with you, that over the process of like 3 milliseconds, she's processing every decision she made that brought her to this point. It's like
her life is flashing before her eyes.
Yep. And I just immediately turn around and go shave. Yep.
You said earlier in the conversation that you think that there are lots of people and you're a little bit younger than me, and your kids are a little bit, I think you're a little bit younger than me, and your kids are definitely a little younger than mine. But you see lots of positive examples of dads who are invested a little bit more deeply. Do you see that turning like societally, or do you think you're just in a pocket of people who are more invested in that way?
That's a good question. I don't know from a society perspective, but I think from a community perspective, I definitely see that. I think there's a different like level of involvement that it's necessary now. And I think part of that's opening up, more dads to realize just how fun this is. Like play off the script, and the better your relationship is with your kids. Like the more you actually enjoy parenting. It's not that job. It's not that responsibility. Yeah. It's like this whole phase is just so magical. Like you don't want to miss out on a single second of it. But I think that might be, like one of the benefits of kind of what's playing now. But yeah, I mean, in our neighborhood, in our community, in most cases, both parents have to work. So you have to you have to figure this timeshare out a little bit. And there's a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, there really are. And I think I was talking with just about what we were saying earlier, that for a season, gender roles were very clearly defined, and now they're messier. There's more blurry lines. And so sometimes that can mean that one of the people in the relationship is maybe carrying more or carrying a heavier load. But I'm really grateful that we're in a time that I think allows the gift of being more connected to your kids.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing more incredible than, and like this is my bias, but I really do just think objectively, there's nothing more incredible than watching a human being not just be born, but come into their own personhood and to watch them develop. Yeah. And I still have those moments where I look at my, adult kids and my near adult kids and I just look at them and I just study them for a second. And I'm like, this is just profound to think about where you came from and how you're developing. And I think I'll be, if I make it to 80 years old, I think I'll still be looking at my, 60-year-old, almost 60-year-old kids and still be marveling at just the wonder of the human journey that you get to see uniquely through the eyes of being a parent.
Yeah, I do that too. And that's when they're always like, "Why are you staring at me, you weirdo?"
Yeah.
What's with that
They
face?
break the tender moment. Yeah, you're like all this.
Completely.
There's like strings playing, and you're like, eyes are tearing up, and you're like, what? Stop looking at me. You're so weird.
I'm going to leave the room now. Yeah. So, but yeah, I totally get that. And I have those, those moments. And like, it happens a lot more now with kid 3 than it did with kid 1. Cause I was still figuring out so much of this stuff, but yeah, so like, there's no preparation that you can go through to be ready for that birth, like for that moment where you get to hold your first kid or hold any of your kids. And then that responsibility that you feel whenever you put them in a car and drive them home, because that's the moment that you're in charge from that point. Before that, if you beef it, there's a nurse there, you're good. But like now, it's on you. You got to figure this out.
Crazy moment.
And
then you put them in their car and they drive away. Even at 16, and you're like, there's no grown up in that car. What are you doing?
This is not right.
So as we wrap this up, we've been all over the map just reflecting on. This is like an ode to fatherhood, reflecting on fatherhood. Is there anything that you've not been able to say that you want to say about the journey, or any counsel or support or encouragement you'd want to give? And if you said it all, that's fine.
I think in some cases it's like what I've tried to do was see cases like either from my childhood where I saw like families who were happy together and functioning well together, and just tried to like emulate that as much as I possibly could. And some of the small nuances would be like praying together as a family, like before every meal. I know it's kind of like a given in many cases with like a church community, but I mean, it happens a lot. Sometimes it doesn't, but like that was really important for me to start up. And we were never like super disciplined with it. Like whenever I was like a kid, but it was something that Rach and I started doing. And I get to pray with the kids a lot. And that's that's really active. That's one of the things I try to coach them on is, we kind of live in an era where, like an argument seems to be enough. Like I can argue for something and then walk away. It's like arguments never change the heart of somebody. Right. It's the inspiration that does. And that's where if you want to really change somebody else, inspire them.
Yeah.
And that's in being the best version of yourself. Being that beacon for Christ. And you'll be amazed at what sort of incredible change you can make. So my kids get all kinds of gushy stuff like that from me.
Yeah.
And I get all emotional about it.
Yeah. And I would add to your list for me, being the best version of yourself. And then also that includes being the best version of yourself when you've messed up. And you already said, you're quick to ask for forgiveness or to apologize to your kids. And I think that's important for them to see, just the humility of saying, okay, I was wrong. I was wrong. I've got all the power here and, but I was wrong and that wasn't okay. I think that vulnerability of just kind of the messiness of life too. And they see it, they see most of it. And so owning it and helping them know what to do with it, I think is really powerful. And then you reminded me of just one of the privileges I had when my kids were growing up was because Jocelyn was home with them more during the day. I got bedtime. That was kind of my duty. But man, even though there were times where I'm just like, I don't want to do this. I want to go watch TV or I want to go to bed. The conversations, the prayer time, them talking about their fears or their worries, like those were really, really powerful times that paved the way for conversations I have, to this day when my daughter who's in college will text me or call me and just talk to me about a friendship or something. Like we've been there, we were there when they were little and they're lying in bed trying to go to sleep and their anxieties or fears or regrets of the day overtake them and they can't help but verbalize them. And so those are, you just reminded me of the power of those moments.
It's great. And like with the 7-year-old, it's the rapid fire. I mean, it's thought after thought that are in no way connected in any way. It's just these like neurons firing. And this, like what's going through her mind is just amazing to me. And then, as you get like older up the chain, those nighttime conversations get much more, personal, and then there's a depth to them. And each one is completely special. But yeah, that's sacred time that we get. And I just, no matter how tired you are, you got to make that journey. And I have a special prayer for each of them. And I couldn't miss, even when they're away, like staying at a friend's house, I still kind of text them that good night setup. And then approve their YouTube for another couple hours or whatever they're asking for. They give them time.
Screen time. Yeah.
Fix it. Yeah.
So I think my last question for you then is I don't know how you figured out so many of the things that you're implementing into your life approach. And there's probably lots of things, but is there something in particular that has helped you on the journey to being the dad that you want to be and being the husband that you want to be? Like, is there any, for someone who's going, I could walk away from this conversation as be like, Joe innately has something in him that enables him to do this. And I don't have the first clue about what I don't know that I'm a great dad, or I don't know that I'll be a great dad someday. Like, what helps you on this journey? And is there anything that's helpful to you that might be helpful to other people?
Yeah. I think it's that, like you don't have to have any sort of like special formula, and every one of us is created differently. I think what's important is to try anything. And that effort in itself that you put in to try to be better, it manifests. It makes you better at what you're doing. And I absolutely adore my kids, but I know like my most important job, at least in the home, is to be like the right spouse to Rachel.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, if I am that right spouse, the rest of it just works itself out.
Yeah.
But keep your focus where it needs to be.
Yeah. I remember my mind being blown when I heard a pastor once say, the primary relationship in the household is between the husband and wife. And I'm like, wait, what? No, it's about the kids. It's about the kids. Like, and this before I was married and had kids. And then I was like, oh, that's actually not right. That and I remember a sociology prof saying the best thing that a father can do for his kids is to love their mother. And that's how he just put it. And I'm like, sociologically, that was his answer to family. So yeah, I think that could get lost in this whole conversation, that we get so focused on our kids that we forget that what our kids need most is for us to love their mother. And that would apply even if you're not, for those who are watching who are not with the mother of their children, to still love and honor that woman, I think is really, really important for the well-being of kids, but especially for your future, because the kids are going to leave.
Yep.
They will leave. I'm telling you.
Yeah. And I think Doug
That's good.
might have mentioned it too. It was like one of the most important thing you can do is just to be there. Yeah. Like you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be right on everything you're doing, but just physically be there with them. Yeah. And kind of that's the other aspect. And I try to physically be there and emotionally be there too.
Yeah.
And it's in the world right now where there's so many distractions, there's so much that pulls us away, that we all have so many challenges that we're facing and that we're problems that we're trying to solve and tackle, monstrous ones and tiny ones. And it's just trying to figure out the special ways for you to push that aside, and just focus on the spouse God gave you and those tiny little beings that you've been blessed with. And it's that's where our focus needs to be, and then the reward is just so great. Every moment, every little memory. I adore it. So,
well, I honor the fact that you're so dialed into it and that you're appreciative of it. It's easy to lose the sense of wonder and appreciation. So today you've reminded me of that perspective, and I think it's valuable. I also want to say thank you for sitting in the chair for so long. I know this is hard for you. You should be. Should be doing some, some tricks or something. I don't know. And last, I just want to say your kids are really lucky to have you, and so is your wife.
Oh, thank you.
You're a good man.
Well, and Rachel asked that she can come on at some point to refute everything that I've said.
Yeah. We'll
so
let her.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Awesome.
Well, thank you, Joe, for joining us. For any of you who are watching along and you're in the St. Louis area, we do have different action teams or groups of people who get together to try to become better in different parts of life, whether that's marriage or whether it's parenting or just really in any part of life. And you don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be a part of Pathfinder to do those things. You can find a complete listing at pathfinderstl.org/whole life. And if you're someone who is just kind of wondering where to begin on your part of the whole life journey, we have a free whole life assessment available for you at that same website, or you can go to ippodcast.org. That's In Pursuit Podcast, ippodcast.org. If you haven't figured it out yet, I think the summary of this conversation is you just got to try. Just get out there and do something. God bless you as you do.